My daughter-in-law said, "You're not needed here. I think—" I was folding towels on a Tuesday morning when I first heard the words that would split my life in half. Not the big words, not the cruel ones, just a few quiet sentences spoken into a phone she thought I couldn't hear. I was in the laundry room. She was in the kitchen. The door was cracked open, maybe 2 inches. I was folding a bath towel that still had my grandson's baby shampoo smell on it. That smell. God, that smell. I lifted the towel to my face and breathed it in, and I was happy. I was 69 years old, and I was happy. I had a son who loved me, a daughter-in-law who let me help, 2 grandsons who called me Nana, a house I had paid for, a husband of 43 years who still held my hand in the car. I was folding towels and listening to the soft sounds of a home that I thought was mine. Then I heard her laugh. Not a happy laugh, a nervous laugh, the kind of laugh people use when they are about to say something dangerous. She said, "Well, I don't know how to tell her." Then she was quiet for a few seconds. Then she said, "I think she suspects something." Then she laughed again. I stopped folding. I held the towel against my chest. I could feel my heart beating through the fabric. I told myself not to listen. I told myself to walk into the kitchen and make another pot of coffee and pretend I had heard nothing. But my feet would not move.
My feet were glued to the linoleum floor that I had scrubbed on my hands and knees the day before, because I wanted everything to be perfect for when they came home from their vacation. The vacation. That was another thing. They went to Florida for 10 days, my son Mark and his wife Lisa and the boys. They said they needed a break. They said work had been stressful. I said, "Go enjoy yourselves." I watched their dog, I watered their plants, I cleaned their garage, because I thought it would be a nice surprise. I threw away old paint cans and broken toys and mouse droppings. I spent 3 days in that garage. 3 days. My back hurt for a week after, but I did not complain. I never complained. That was my job. That was my role. I was the grandmother. I was the helper. I was the woman who showed up with casseroles and birthday presents and $20 bills slipped into Christmas cards. I was the woman who never said no. The conversation in the kitchen went on for another minute. I heard her say the name Andrea. I did not know any Andrea. Then she said the word trust. Then she said the word long-term. Then she said my husband's name, Richard. She said Richard is on board. I felt something crack inside my ribs. Not my heart. Something deeper, something older, something that had been holding me together for 69 years. Richard was on board. My husband of 43 years was on board with something that required a secret phone call in my kitchen while I folded towels in the laundry room. I folded the last towel. I stacked it on top of the others. I walked into the kitchen and I smiled. I was good at smiling. I had been smiling for 50 years, smiling at parent-teacher conferences, smiling at anniversary parties, smiling at funerals, smiling when my own mother died and my husband held my hand, but his eyes were watching the television over my shoulder. I smiled and I said, "Who is on the phone?" She looked at me. She looked at the towel in my hands. She said, "No one, just work." She was a terrible liar. Lisa was always a terrible liar. Her left eye twitched when she lied. It was twitching now. I said, "Okay." I put the towels in the hallway closet. I went back to my house 2 miles away. I sat at my kitchen table and I stared at the wall for 3 hours. That was the first crack. Not the fall, just the crack. The crack that tells you something is wrong, but you do not know what. The crack that makes you go back through every memory and look at it sideways. The time my son forgot my birthday. The time my husband said, "We need to talk about the house." The time Lisa said, "You are so generous with your time, Nana." That word generous, not kind, not loving, generous. Like I was a bank, like I was dispensing something that had a limit. I want to tell you about my son, Mark. Mark was born in March. It snowed the night he was born. I held him in my arms and I promised him I would never leave him. I kept that promise for 46 years. I drove him to soccer practice at 6 in the morning. I sewed his Halloween costumes until 2 in the morning. I paid for his college. Not all of it, but most of it. I gave him the down payment for his first house, $23,000. I wrote the check, and I did not ask for it back. I never asked for anything back. That was my mistake.
I thought if you gave enough, eventually the giving would turn into love. But giving does not turn into love. Giving just turns into more giving. And then one day they look at you and they see a wallet with legs. They see a free babysitter with gray hair. They see a woman who will watch the boys on a Friday night so they can go to dinner, and then they will not call her on Saturday morning because Saturday morning is for sleeping in. I was that woman. I was the woman who picked up the boys from school when Lisa had a doctor appointment. I was the woman who stayed at their house for a week when Mark had the flu and Lisa had a work trip. I was the woman who bought the new refrigerator when theirs broke. I did not tell anyone about the refrigerator. I did not say, "Look what I did." I just bought it. I had it delivered. I thought they would be grateful. I thought gratitude was the same thing as love. It is not. 3 weeks after the phone call, I found the papers. I was not looking for them.
I was cleaning out the guest bedroom at my son's house because my granddaughter was coming to visit from college. My other son's daughter, not Mark's child. My younger son, David's child, Emily. She was coming for spring break. I wanted the room to be nice for her. I stripped the bed. I vacuumed the carpet. I opened the closet to find extra pillows. That is when I saw the box. A brown cardboard box, taped shut. I should not have opened it. I know that now. But I opened it. I pulled the tape off with my fingernails. Inside there were folders, manila folders, labeled with dates. The first folder said estate planning. I opened it. There were papers with my husband's name, Richard Morrison, and Mark Morrison, and Lisa Morrison. My name was not on any of the papers. Not one. I read the papers standing in the guest bedroom of my son's house, with the smell of vacuum dust in my nose. The papers said that my husband had transferred ownership of our house to a trust. The trust was managed by Mark and Lisa. The house I had paid for. The house I had bought with money from my mother's estate after she died. Not our money, my money. My mother had left me $140,000. I used $60,000 to pay off the mortgage. I put the rest into savings for retirement. The house was supposed to be mine. It was mine. But the papers said it was not mine anymore. It belonged to the trust. And the trust belonged to my son and his wife. I sat down on the guest bed. I could not breathe. I thought I was having a heart attack. I am not being dramatic. I actually thought my heart was stopping. The room got dark around the edges. I put my head between my knees. I waited. The darkness went away. I stood up. I looked at the papers again. The transfer had happened 8 months ago. 8 months. I had been living in that house for 8 months, thinking it was mine, paying the utilities, watering the garden, cleaning the gutters, painting the bathroom, all of it. And the whole time, the house belonged to my son and his daughter-in-law. I closed the box. I put it back in the closet. I finished making the guest bed. I drove home. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just drove. I parked in my driveway. My driveway. Except it was not my driveway anymore. I sat in my car for an hour. Then I went inside. My husband Richard was watching golf in the living room. He looked at me. He said, "How was your day?" I said, "Fine." I went into the bedroom and I closed the door. I sat on the edge of the bed. I looked at the walls I had painted, the curtains I had sewn, the dresser I had refinished with my own hands. None of it was mine. None of it had ever been mine. It had just been borrowed, and the loan was due. I want to go back for a minute. I want to tell you about Richard. Richard was a good husband in the beginning. He was handsome. He was kind. He brought me flowers on our first anniversary. He held my hand when I gave birth to Mark. He cried at his father's funeral. He was a real man. A man who fixed things. A man who mowed the lawn and changed the oil in the car and carved the turkey on Thanksgiving. I loved him. I really loved him. I loved him for 43 years. But somewhere along the way, he stopped loving me. I do not know exactly when it happened. Maybe it was after Mark was born. Maybe it was after I gained weight. Maybe it was after I stopped being fun. I do not know. But I know the exact moment I realized it. We were at a party, a Christmas party at his boss's house.
I was wearing a red dress. I had lost 10 pounds. I felt pretty. I walked up to Richard and I touched his arm. He looked at me. He did not smile. He looked at me the way you look at a stranger who has interrupted your conversation. He said, "What do you need?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Let me get you a drink." "What do you need?" Like I was a coworker, like I was an inconvenience. That was 15 years ago. I stayed for 15 more years. Why did I stay? Because I was scared. Because I did not know who I was without him. Because I thought if I left, I would be alone, and being alone was worse than being unloved. I was wrong about that. Being unloved in a room full of people is much worse than being alone. After I found the papers, I started watching. I watched Richard. I watched Mark. I watched Lisa. I paid attention to the things they said and the things they did not say. The little things. The way Richard stopped asking me about my day.
The way Mark stopped hugging me goodbye. The way Lisa smiled at me like I was a child who did not understand grown-up conversations. I noticed that the grocery money in our joint account was getting lower. I noticed that Richard had opened a new credit card in his name only. I noticed that my name was no longer on the electric bill. I had not looked at the electric bill in years. Richard paid the bills. I trusted him. I trusted him the way you trust the sun to rise. And the whole time he was taking my name off everything. He was erasing me, one utility at a time. I called my sister Carol. Carol lives in Arizona. She is 3 years older than me. She is divorced. She has been divorced for 20 years. She is the one who told me not to trust Richard. She said it at my wedding. She said it at Mark's high school graduation. She said it at my mother's funeral. She said he is not a good man. I never listened. Carol answered the phone on the second ring. I said, "I need to tell you something." She said, "What?" I told her about the papers. I told her about the trust. I told her about the phone call. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I told you so." Then she started crying. That is the thing about sisters. They tell you, "I told you so," and then they cry because they wish they had been wrong. Carol flew in the next week. We sat at my kitchen table. She brought a notebook. She wrote down everything. The dates, the names, the documents. She said, "You need a lawyer." I said, "I cannot afford a lawyer." She said, "You cannot afford not to have a lawyer." She called a lawyer for me, a woman named Diane Klein. Diane was 52 years old. She wore black pantsuits and had short gray hair and did not smile very much. I liked her immediately. I went to her office on a Thursday afternoon. I brought the copies Carol had made of the papers. Diane looked at them. She looked at me. She said, "Your husband committed fraud." I said, "What?" She said, "He forged your signature on the trust documents." She pointed to a line at the bottom of the page. She said, "This is not your signature." I looked at it. She was right. It was close, but it was not mine. The M was wrong. My M has a loop. This M had a straight line. Richard had practiced my signature. He had practiced it until he could make it look almost real, but he could not make the loop. He could never make the loop. I want to tell you about that moment. Sitting in Diane Klein's office with the sun coming through the blinds, knowing that my husband of 43 years had forged my name on a legal document, knowing that my son and his wife had watched him do it, or had helped him do it, or at least had not stopped him. The feeling was not anger. It was not sadness. It was something I had never felt before, a kind of cold emptiness, like someone had reached inside my chest and pulled out everything warm. I looked at Diane and I said, "What do I do?" She said, "You fight." I said, "I am 69 years old. I am tired." She said, "I know." Then she said something I will never forget. She said, "They are counting on you being tired. That is the whole plan. They think you will just give up. They think you will just go away. Do not give them what they want." I went home. Richard was in the living room. He was watching golf again. He was always watching golf. I stood in front of the television. He looked at me. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I know about the house." He did not say anything. He just looked at me. His face did not change. That is how I knew he had been expecting this conversation. He had already rehearsed it in his head. He said, "What house?" I said, "Our house. The one you transferred to the trust. The one you forged my signature on." He stood up. He walked to the window. He looked out at the backyard. The backyard I had planted with roses. The roses were blooming.
They were red and pink and white. I had planted those roses for our 40th anniversary. He said, "You do not understand." I said, "Explain it to me." He turned around. His eyes were cold. I had never seen his eyes like that. Not in 43 years. He said, "The house is for Mark and Lisa. For the boys. For their future." I said, "What about my future?" He said, "We will take care of you." I said, "How?" He said, "We will find a place for you. A nice place. We will make sure you are comfortable." I said, "A place like a nursing home." He did not answer. That was the answer. I want you to understand something. I am not a stupid woman.
I know what a nursing home is. I have visited friends in nursing homes. The smell of bleach and urine, the fluorescent lights that never turn off, the trays of gray food, the old women sitting in wheelchairs in the hallways with their mouths open, the ones who never have visitors, the ones whose children put them there and then forget to call. That was my future. That was what Richard and Mark and Lisa had planned for me. A nice place. A comfortable place. A place where I could wait to die while they lived in my house and spent my money and raised my grandchildren. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the dark in my bedroom. I listened to Richard breathe. He was sleeping. He was actually sleeping. After everything he had done, he could still close his eyes and fall asleep. I hated him in that moment. Not a hot hate. A cold hate. The kind of hate that freezes you from the inside. I thought about all the years I had given him, all the dinners I had cooked, all the shirts I had ironed, all the times I had lied to his mother about why he was not at family dinners, all the times I had covered for him when he drank too much, all the times I had held his hand in the dark when he was scared about money or work or death. And he was going to put me in a nursing home. He was going to take my house and my money and my garden and my roses, and he was going to put me in a room with a stranger and a bedpan, and he was going to visit once a month if I was lucky. The next morning, I called Diane. I said, "I want to fight." She said, "Good." She filed a lawsuit the following week. Fraud, undue influence, financial exploitation of an elderly person. That last one was the one that made the papers. The local newspaper picked it up. The headline said, "Elderly woman sues husband, son, and daughter-in-law over stolen house." I did not want it in the papers. Diane said it would help. She said public pressure would make them settle. She was right. The day after the article came out, my phone started ringing. Neighbors, old friends, people I had not spoken to in years. They said, "We are so sorry." They said, "We had no idea." They said, "Your family always seemed so nice." That was the worst part. That was the part that broke my heart in a way the house never could. My family had seemed nice. They had seemed like a normal American family. The kind of family you see in commercials for life insurance or breakfast cereal. The grandmother who bakes cookies. The son who coaches Little League. The daughter-in-law who volunteers at the school book fair. That was us. That was all a lie. Mark called me the day after the article. He was crying. I had not heard my son cry since he was 12 years old and his dog died. He said, "Mom, how could you do this to us?" I said, "How could you do this to me?" He said, "We were trying to protect the house." From what? From taxes? From creditors? From the government? He had an answer for everything. He had been rehearsing this conversation too. I said, "You forged my signature." He said, "Dad handled the paperwork." I said, "You knew." He was quiet. I said, "You knew and you let him do it." He said, "It was for the boys, for your grandsons, for their college, for their future." I said, "What about my future?" He said, "We would never put you in a home. We were going to build a guest house in the backyard. You would have your own space. You would be close to the boys. You would see them every day." I said, "Is that what Lisa wanted?" He did not answer. That was the answer. Lisa called me the next day. She did not cry. She was angry. She said, "You have no idea what it is like to raise children today. You have no idea how expensive everything is. You have no idea how hard we work." I said, "I raised 2 children. I worked 40 hours a week. I know exactly how hard it is." She said, "It is different now." I said, "It is not different. People are the same. Greed is the same. Selfishness is the same." She said, "You are being dramatic." I said, "I am being honest." She said, "We needed that house. The boys need a good school district. The boys need a safe neighborhood. The boys need a yard to play in." I said, "What do I need?"
She said, "You need to think about someone other than yourself for once." That was when I hung up. I hung up the phone and I sat in my kitchen and laughed. I laughed until I needed to think about someone other than myself. I had spent 46 years thinking about other people.
I had spent 46 years putting everyone else first, and now I was the selfish one. The lawsuit went on for 8 months. 8 months of depositions and hearings and phone calls and paperwork. 8 months of watching my family turn into strangers. Richard moved out of the house. He moved into an apartment near the golf course. He took the good car. He took the television. He took the silverware from our wedding. He left me the broken lamp and the couch with the stain and the dishes with the chips and the edges. He left me the things that were not worth taking. I stayed in the house. Diane said I had the right to stay. The house was still legally mine until the court decided otherwise. I stayed in my house. I slept in my bed. I watered my roses. I cooked dinner for one. I ate at the kitchen table alone. I watched the evening news alone. I went to bed alone. I woke up alone. The silence was louder than anything I had ever heard. Carol came to visit every other weekend. She brought groceries. She brought wine. She brought her dog, a little white thing named Gus. Gus slept on my bed. He snored. I loved that dog more than I loved most people at that point. Carol said, "You need to sell the house." She said, "You need to take the money and move somewhere warm, somewhere with palm trees, somewhere where you can sit on a beach and forget these people exist." I said, "I cannot forget them. They are my family." She said, "They are not your family. They are people who share your DNA."
That is not the same thing. She was right. She had always been right. But I could not sell the house. The house was all I had left. The walls, the floors, the garden, the roses, the ghost of my marriage, the ghost of my son's childhood, the ghost of the life I thought I was living. If I sold the house, I would be admitting that the ghosts were real, and I was not ready to do that. The case went to mediation in the spring. The mediator was a retired judge named Patricia Hines. She was 74 years old. She had gray hair and a soft voice, and eyes that had seen everything. We sat in a conference room, me and Diane on one side, Richard and Mark and Lisa and their lawyer on the other side. Patricia said, "Let us try to find a solution that works for everyone." I looked at my husband. He would not look at me. He looked at the table. He looked at his hands. He looked at his lawyer. He would not look at me. I looked at my son. He was crying. He was actually crying. Tears running down his face. He looked like the little boy I used to tuck into bed. The little boy who was afraid of the dark. The little boy who used to hold my hand at the doctor's office. I almost gave in. I almost said, "Okay, take the house. Take everything. Just let me have my son back." But then I looked at Lisa. She was not crying. She was not sad. She was angry. She was sitting with her arms crossed and her jaw tight, and she was staring at me like I was the enemy. And I realized something in that moment.
Lisa had never loved me. She had tolerated me. She had used me, but she had never loved me. And Mark had chosen her. He had chosen her over me. He had chosen her the day he married her, and he had chosen her every day since. That is what marriage is. You choose your spouse. You leave your parents behind. I knew that. I had done the same thing with Richard. I had chosen him over my own mother. I had chosen him every day for 43 years. And now I was alone because of it. Patricia proposed a settlement. I would keep the house, but I would have to buy out Richard's share. The house was worth $420,000. Richard's share was half, $210,000. I did not have $210,000. Diane said, "We can get a mortgage." I said, "I am 69 years old. No bank will give me a mortgage." Diane said, "There are programs for seniors." I said, "Find one." She found one. The interest rate was high. The payments were high. But I would keep the house. I would keep my garden. I would keep my roses. I would keep the ghost of my life. That was something. Richard signed the settlement. Mark signed the settlement. Lisa did not sign. She refused.
She said she would rather burn the house down than let me keep it. Those were her exact words. The mediator heard her. The court reporter wrote it down. Lisa said I would rather burn the house down than let her keep it. Patricia looked at Lisa.
She said, "Young lady, you need to think very carefully about what you are saying." Lisa stood up. She walked out of the room. She slammed the door. Mark ran after her. Richard sat at the table with his head in his hands. I looked at him. For the first time in years, I felt something other than coldness. I felt pity. He had lost everything. His wife, his son, his daughter-in-law, his house, his money, his reputation. All of it. For what? For a plan that had failed. For a future that would never happen. He looked old. He looked broken. He looked like a man who had made a terrible mistake and would spend the rest of his life regretting it. And I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The judge approved the settlement, without Lisa's signature. The house was mine. Legally mine. Really mine. My name on the deed. My name on the mortgage. My name on the electric bill. My name on everything. I was 70 years old, and I owned a house I could barely afford, and I was alone. That was the victory. That was what I had fought for. A house full of silence, and a mortgage that would outlive me. I did not hear from Mark for 6 months. Then one day he showed up at my door. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. His eyes were red. He was carrying a duffel bag. He said, "Lisa left me. She took the boys. She moved to Florida. She said she could not stay in this town after everything that happened." I looked at my son who I had held in my arms the night he was born. My son, who I had loved more than I had ever loved anyone. I said, "Come in." He came in. He sat at my kitchen table. He cried. I made him coffee. I made him toast. I watched him eat. He looked like a little boy again. The little boy who scraped his knee. The little boy who failed his math test. The little boy who needed his mother to make everything okay. I wanted to be that mother. I wanted to wrap my arms around him and tell him everything would be fine. But I could not. Because everything was not fine, and I was not sure it would ever be fine again. He stayed for 3 days. He slept in the guest room, the same guest room where I had found the box of papers. I did not tell him that. I did not tell him a lot of things. We ate dinner together. We watched television together. We did not talk about the lawsuit. We did not talk about the house. We did not talk about Lisa. We talked about the boys. He showed me pictures on his phone. They had grown. They looked like him. They looked like Richard. They had the same blue eyes, the same crooked smile. I asked him if I could see them. He said Lisa would not allow it. He said she had told the boys that I was a bad person, that I had tried to steal their house, that I did not love them. I felt something break inside me again. A different break. A break that could not be fixed with a mortgage or a court order or a settlement. The boys were lost to me. My grandsons. The little boys who called me Nana.
The little boys who let me read them bedtime stories. The little boys who held my hand when we crossed the street. They would grow up thinking I was a monster. They would grow up not knowing that I had spent every Christmas morning watching them open presents, every birthday baking them cakes, every school play sitting in the front row. They would never know. And that was the real betrayal. Not the house, not the money, not the signature. The real betrayal was losing the love of those boys. That was the thing I could never get back. Mark left on a Sunday morning. He hugged me at the door. It was a real hug, the first real hug in years. He said, "I am sorry, Mom." I said, "I know." He said, "I love you." I said, "I know that too." He walked to his car. He got in. He drove away. I watched until I could not see his car anymore. Then I closed the door. I leaned against the wall. I slid down until I was sitting on the floor. I sat there for a long time. The house was quiet. The roses were blooming outside the window. The sun was warm on my face. I had everything I had fought for, and I had nothing at all. That was 2 years ago. I am 72 now. I still live in the house. The mortgage is hard. I have to watch every penny. I do not buy new clothes. I do not eat out. I drive a car that is 15 years old and makes a noise I cannot afford to fix. But I have the house. I have the garden. I have the roses. I have the ghosts. Mark calls me once a week.
He lives in an apartment near the highway. He works at a car dealership. He does not see the boys very often either. Lisa moved to Orlando. She got remarried. A man named Todd. Todd owns a roofing company. The boys called Todd Dad. Mark told me that. He was crying when he said it. I did not cry. I have no tears left for Lisa. I have no tears left for Todd. I have no tears left for the house or the money or the signature. The tears I have left are for the boys, for the sound of their little feet running down the hallway, for the sound of them saying Nana, for the sound of them laughing. Those are the only tears I have left. Richard calls me sometimes. He calls on holidays, on our anniversary, on my birthday. He does not say much. He asks how I am. He asks about the roses. He asks about the garden. He does not ask to come over. I do not invite him. Whatever love I had for him died in that conference room, not in a dramatic way, in a quiet way, like a light being turned off, like a door being closed, like a book being put back on a shelf and never opened again. He is a stranger now, a stranger who knows my middle name, a stranger who knows the mole on my back, a stranger who knows the sound I make when I am scared, but a stranger still. I think about forgiveness sometimes. I think about whether I should forgive them. The Bible says you should forgive. My pastor says you should forgive. Carol says, forgive them for your own sake, not for theirs. I do not know if I have forgiven them. I do not know if I ever will. I do not think about it very much anymore. I think about other things. I think about the garden. I think about the roses. I think about the way the light comes through the kitchen window in the morning. I think about the way the coffee smells when it is brewing. I think about the way the world is quiet before the sun comes up. I think about all the small, beautiful things that have nothing to do with betrayal or money or family. I think about those things because if I thought about the other things, I would not be able to get out of bed in the morning. One last thing. There is a moment I cannot forget. It was the day after Lisa walked out of the mediation. I was in the garden. I was pruning the roses. The sun was going down. The sky was orange and pink. I had dirt on my hands. I had sweat on my forehead. I was tired. I was so tired. And I looked up at the house. My house. The house I had fought for. The house I had almost lost. The house where I had raised my children. The house where I had loved my husband. The house where I had believed in things that turned out not to be true. And I said out loud to no one, I am still here. I said it again. I am still here. The roses did not answer. The house did not answer. The sky did not answer. But I heard it. I heard my own voice. And for 1 second, I felt something that was not sadness or anger or regret. I felt something that felt like survival. Just survival. Nothing more. But sometimes survival is enough. Sometimes survival is the only thing you get, and you have to take it. You have to take it and hold it close and keep going. Because the sun comes up anyway. The roses bloom anyway. And you are still here. Even when they tried to erase you. Even when they tried to put you in a room with a bedpan and a stranger and a life you did not choose. You are still here. And that is not nothing. That is not nothing at all.